What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. Really happy you can join us on this Wednesday, November 2nd of 2022. Before we get into anything fun, and we have a lot to get into today, so I'm super excited. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth to all your friends that this is the best podcast on the planet. And go find us on the socials at The Alex Cuesta Show. But I spoke a little bit too soon about the best podcast on the planet, because I'm talking to somebody right now who is the co-host of one of the most fun podcasts I listen to right now. Actually, I think one of the more important podcasts out there right now. I think everybody should listen to. I'm going to introduce her in a second. I'm going to make her wait for a second. Right now, I'm going to make fun of my brother like I do every week. Dave, you're back. Hi.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if we're the best podcast on the planet because I'm here. I mean, I make it difficult. I like to anchor you as much as possible to make everything a challenge, to make everything worth it once we actually gain things. But, you know, I'm here for that reason.
The benefit of having guests on is you have to temper yourself from getting me to go on my angry rants because you can't be as much of a troll, because we want to hear from them and less from me, which is why we have them on, because they're awesome. So the good thing is, too, you're going to be more mute. I'm just kidding. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce this guest because it's because of a former guest that we had. So if anyone that goes back to episode 42, we had John Zeigler on. And at the time, we talked to John Zeigler about the Duke BYU volleyball scandal. He was right on top of that. We mentioned his podcast with the benefit of hindsight about the Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky scandal. And I do have to say, after listening to that, fully on Jerry Sandusky's innocent. Joe Pod did nothing wrong. Bandwagon. Dave, are you there yet?
I wouldn't say I'm there yet because I'm also haven't finished the whole thing. A lot of the arguments make sense, though, from Zeigler's side.
So right next to Zeigler, half of that team on that podcast, though, was our guest today, who was super important in that podcast. Because one of the things, if you go back and listen to it, as John is ranting and raving, this individual is there asking all the questions that us as the listener is thinking in our heads. And she's giving a voice to all the listeners and all the questions we want to hear. So without further ado, she's Liz Habib. She's a co-host of a new podcast, Back with John Zeigler. She's a glutton for punishment, The Death of Journalism. She's a journalist for 35 years in broadcast television, and she's a professor of journalism at both Syracuse and Arizona State, if I'm correct. Am I correct with that, Liz?
You are correct. I worked at both of those places. I taught broadcast journalism, sports journalism. Yes. Hi, Alex. Hi, David. It's really good to be on with you guys.
And God bless you for entering into the world of academia, because right now academia is a complete and total mess. And you, from everything I've heard and from a little bit of the conversation we had, you sound like a logical human being. So it's got to be really tough to be caught in academia. So before we jump into the podcast, I want to touch on that a little bit with you. What was it like? Because me and David talked about how basically, journalism is kind of screwed right now. They're not doing their jobs very well. There's very few that do it well. What was it like going into these journal students, and did you have to kind of reset them from some of the things they've been taught already?
Yes. To say that very quickly, yes. So here's the deal. I spent 35 years, right, on broadcast TV. I'm 1 degree of separation from everybody in broadcast journalism, the news directors. There's just no way I don't know these people on television. I have all that experience, right? I worked in so many different places. The last place I was in Los Angeles, working at the Fox station there. The dean of Newhouse up at Syracuse University, right? Newhouse is the best broadcast journalism school in the country. It's Sports U, right? Sports Journalism U, Mike Tirico, Bob Costas. I wanted to be Bob Costas when I grew up. That was really my aspiration. He finds out, because I'm friends with his wife, he finds out in days that I'm literally available, and he calls me and goes, come and teach with us. That's amazing. I really admire him a lot, and of course it was Syracuse. I dreamed of going to Syracuse. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, but then decided not to transfer and stay at Pitt and get my degree there. But I thought, well, I've always wanted that opportunity to teach. And so I went there and I taught for 9 months, full on professor of broadcast, digital and broadcast journalism. And I loved those students up there, but they have a lot of preconceived notions about what the media is. And oftentimes didn't even believe me. I would have to stop and say, wait a minute, you think I don't know? I did it all. I've been there. I know whether they have even simple things.
Professor Habib, I wrote on my blog this, so it's my truth because we all have blogs now.
Listen, I got criticized. They let students in college freely criticize professors and often take those criticisms with far more seriousness than they do the professors themselves. So the students can criticize. And one of my students wrote this criticism about me at the end of the year and said, she always tells us everybody else is wrong. ESPN is wrong. So-and-so is wrong, that she's the only one that teach it right. How can she be right and they all be wrong? Because that's the case. Because a lot of what I taught is being done wrong out there, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to teach my students the right way. And they didn't always believe that, right?
So you're saying that a tweet isn't a real source?
Oh my God, that's one of the
If LeBron tweets it, it's not a real source?
And if LeBron tweets it, well, so what? LeBron tweets it. What truth is there in it? One of the things I always tell them, you can report what someone says, but you better be careful. Because just because they said it doesn't mean you can report it. You better check it, but they don't know about those things, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the point of journalism school. That's why it's a school. But some of the other things that went on along the way while I was teaching, I realized that there's nothing but an echo chamber out there that's being taught in journalism schools. And it was very disappointing to me, the way students are taught.
So they're fortunate that for the 9 months at Syracuse and, Arizona State, that they had a voice that is going against them, because even if it didn't smack them in the face at that moment, they definitely gave them something in the back of their heads. Because now as they're listening to their other professors, they're going to be like, man, that crazy Professor Habib, she said this wasn't right. And maybe it might spark them to have a little bit of critical thinking and not think critically, which there is a big difference between critical theory and thinking critically and being a critical thinker. I'm not going to get into that. We can have a whole 9-hour podcast on that. But this is a perfect segue into what you're currently doing. A podcast back with John Zeigler named The Death of Journalism. You guys release episodes twice a week, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Twice a week. Episode 5 just came out. And guys, really, this is unbelievable. Episode 4 was it was actually number 14 on the list of
I saw that.
Right, the most listened to podcasts on Apple. We're on episode 4, so we're on to something here that people want to hear about, and it's not just the regular rant. Oh, you guys, everybody already knows the media is biased. It has nothing to do. It has everything to do with that. Nothing to do with that. We show you how the media does this. We take it down to the bottom and then we sort of dissect it, for no better way to say it, to show you how they get it wrong.
Yeah. So, and I think it's really good, because there are times where, we might be talking to someone and they don't know a story, and we could say how they got this wrong, but we don't have everything that they got wrong about it. You guys are compiling all the evidence and not even evidence, but all just a record keeping of what happened and throughout this whole timeline of the story.
It's as journalists, and John is really excellent at finding every last detail, but every last detail is what matters. Mm-hmm. Because as journalists, this gives you an understanding of how a journalist works, like how a story presents itself in the beginning, how you should be questioning that story. If you just take it like this and run with it, how you go the wrong direction, how very few people are breaking stories across the United States, across the world. Very few people. So we really look at things, and he broke down the BYU Duke story so beautifully.
He did that on our show as well, and it was amazing.
Yeah, right? And I see it all happening, and it's just a tweet will cause them a tweet.
Yeah. From a politician, nonetheless.
And here's the thing. Here is the thing that I say all the time. There is no such thing as a citizen journalist. A journalist is a trained professional with many, many years experience who understands the nuance of what we're dealing in and the importance of the words in the public, right? In the public domain. And social media has destroyed that.
And what's pathetic is there are citizens now that are doing it better than journalists. There are people, me and David, we're not trained podcasters. We're not trained media people. But I listen to some other professional things, and not to toot our own horns, we're better than a lot of those people. We run solid interviews. We like to get our facts in order. If we're not, I think we present ourselves fairly well. We try to keep our audio quality well, which I think that's a big issue for me, is in the Zoom age, people got so used to having shitty audio that now it's okay if the audio doesn't sound great. And it's like, that's kind of part of the thing. You want to have your audio sounding good enough so that someone doesn't have to wince every time they hear you talk. And it's like, I feel like a lot has been lost from professional journalism. And I have to say, one of the best things about listening to you and John as a team, you talked with John about how detailed he is. And some of the value in John is not necessarily the big stories that he brings in, but a lot of his little side anecdotes that he uses that maybe only John Zeigler will remember. And that he brings back when he brought up LeBron making his own fake race hoax. Who remembers all that? I didn't really remember. Yeah. And I do, because I lived it. Yes.
Right. Because I was the sports anchor at the Fox station in Los Angeles. Yeah. And because I remember that story making the news. And I remember that we could drive down the street to Brentwood and take a look, and there was nothing there to look at. I remember those things. A lot of what John and I talk about, I've known John since my first job in Steubenville, Ohio.
God bless you.
But listen, John is a very polarizing person.
He's awesome. Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so even that podcast, with the benefit of hindsight, when we look back, when I'm in regular company, I was at a dinner not too long ago, and I brought up with the benefit of hindsight, and my nephew knows what it's about. My nephew sort of winced because he knows how controversial it is to suggest that Joe Paterno didn't do anything wrong, let alone Jerry Sandusky didn't do anything wrong.
I bring it up to anybody with a Penn State shirt on. I might not know at this point. It's ridiculous. And I love it. And, and again, you bring kind of, I don't want to say John doesn't bring kind of the authenticity of the media or the stamp, but because you've done it for so long, and John's taken a different route, because he left being a sports anchor fairly quickly in his career, and he decided to go into more of the investigative journalism and making his documents and doing things like that, where you kind of stayed in there. So when you're sitting there and John's talking about the story and you're like, yeah, I covered it. This is X, Y, and Z of what happened in the media. And I know so forth, that you guys bounce off each other so well and you make a really good team. So your arguments are extremely compelling because you're getting both sides. You're getting the guy, John Zeigler, who kind of gives you the broad and then details it. And then we have your side who really knows the inner workings of the mainstream media. And it just creates a very good environment to really comprehend. And you honestly, again, you do a very good job of asking the questions that the listener wants to hear from John, because John can go off on his tangents and you're good at, wait, hold on. What about this? And then you make John explain himself.
Right. And he does. And John, John doesn't have a lot of faith in people, right? And I still actually do believe in people. I actually believe that when people hear someone like me tell them the truth, it's like a breath of fresh air. They sigh in relief. They're like, oh my God, I've been thinking that too. But they're afraid to say it because they're afraid what everyone's going to say to them. And so it's like, oh, thank God. And, I'm not on John's side and everything he says, by no means. Sometimes I think
I've heard you guys have it out. And I love it. Yeah.
But what I love about John and what is right about what goes on with our podcast is you have to keep an open mind. There is no such thing as you're not allowed to have an opinion, a thought, or a theory. This is the United States of America. And when we pass laws like King Gavin does in California that say you're not allowed to spread misinformation about coronavirus, we need to question what society we're living in, right? So I really believe that in the extreme, you find the truth, and you must always search for the truth. We don't get told the truth ever. As journalists, you can never believe you're told the truth. What you can believe you're told is what someone's version of the facts are, and you go with it from there and get as many different sides of the story as you can and let people make up their minds. Now I do make up my mind on things. Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. And so when you're listening to The Death of Journalism, I think episodes 2 and 3 right now are just so incredibly relevant. All of them are relevant. You guys are doing a really good job bringing it down. But 2 and 3, we just lived through something that for generations now, we're going to tell our kids, their kids are going to tell their kids that. And it's, we lived through something that was incredible with COVID-19. And you two did such a great job breaking down from the beginning the mistakes made by media, by the politicians, by everything. And one of the things that you touched on, which actually, it hurt me to listen to, was in the beginning of episode 2, you speaking about what happened with your father in the hospital system and him unfortunately passing away from COVID-19, and just, you can't fake the emotion that you brought out, and it's real, and it was tough to hear. And I know, I wasn't ready to ask you about this on the show. I did not want to bring it up. You kind of suggested it as we talk pre-show, and I appreciate you're willing to have such an open candor, because I would like for you to tell your story about what happened with your father in the hospital system.
Yeah, I love my dad like nobody, right? Like my dad was it. He was my number one guy. He was my great supporter. You don't last 35 years as a woman in journalism or a woman in sports without a really strong dad to be right there for you. And he was like my guy, right? Like my right hand, like your consigliere. You know what I mean? Like there were so many times I had to call him and talk to him about so many different things. We talked sports left and right. He was a great baseball fan, but we talked about everything, right? My mother and my father, to me, it was like, if I needed to know what America thought, I talked to my parents, right? That's what I think. And I still think it. I'm like, my mom is the greatest compass for me, right? She's everyone's mom. That's how I see her.
Yeah.
So my dad, he died during COVID. So it was January, right before the vaccines, although I'm not a vaccine believer. But maybe for my father, for older people who are really sick, maybe that might have made a difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a big vaccine believer, but it was January of 2021. And at that, we were sent home in March of 2020, and all of us. And right, as the media, you remember, we're all sitting from our couches in our living room, whatever we're doing our stories.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I did my sports cast from my sofa in Los Angeles. I have a little penthouse apartment the size of a postage stamp, but I did. Yeah, but I got one, but I have one.
You got one.
So, I spent the summer, I got to August of 2020. It was my sister-in-law's 50th birthday party. I flew to Pittsburgh. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. I can't even remember how I took, maybe I took an extra day off. And
it was incredible. Hearing Americans say we weren't allowed to go somewhere as Americans, that we're going to remember how incredible this time was. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So the last time I saw my father in person alive was August of 2020 at my sister-in-law's 50th birthday party. And it's true of other members of my family as well. So we came from August around to the holidays. And it's unheard of in the media that you have Christmas off. Like, I work in sports. You don't get Christmas off. You're usually working, but it hit at the right time. So I had 3 days off at Christmas and 3 days off at New Year. And I was having to go to the station on the weekends to do a post-game football show. And it was like, do you guys remember this shenanigans? Like, I'm asking you what you remember. We all remember. We'd fill out these online things and get green cards to go into work. We just showed this go for green to go past the security guards to go to the station at Fox. And I was terrified that if my dad asked me to come to see him for Christmas, that was December. My birthday is December 28th, and it was December of 2020. He said, come and visit. And I was terrified to leave Los Angeles to visit him, because my fear was, if the station found out, if the company found out that I was so reckless, God forbid, so reckless, that I would leave town and visit my family. I called and said, what if I leave? Can I go see? And my news director, Erica, told me, well, you'll have to be tested when you come back, and you might have to stay out of the newsroom. And I thought, well, I'm in the middle of football season. I won't be able to do my post-game show. What if they suggest to me that I did something, that would hurt my job, right? That was so irrational, hurt my job. I left town. So I chose not to do it.
But Liz, someone like that deserves amnesty, though, right? She deserves amnesty. That's what they're asking for in the Atlantic. She deserves amnesty for that.
I those people, I can't even discuss to these people. She told me, there was a lot that went on with me that went on with a lot of other people. But But I chose to stay. And it was the worst decision that I ever made. And I tried to make sure I didn't make these bad decisions. I said to myself, when I went for my sister-in-law's birthday, don't do something that you'll regret. Remember, this job isn't going to be here when you're 80 years old. Your life will be here. Don't do something you're going to forget. But at the time, I was so terrified of losing a career that I had for 35 years that I didn't go. And my father, it's hard, guys. It's going to be hard for me.
Yeah, it's fine.
My dad means to me. Called me on the day he drove to the hospital. He said, Liz, I'm driving myself to the hospital, right? I don't think we ever thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
I don't think we thought he was going to die. So he goes to the hospital, and I'm still going to work at the station, telling everyone my dad's in the hospital. And then I'm angry at the hospitals, and I feel like every hospital that did this should be sued.
Yes.
But they won't. But they put him on that lousy protocol. My own brother was a doctor that used to work out of the hospital where my brother was. Where my father was. We should have just gone to the hospital and gotten him out of there. And we didn't. They wouldn't let you, right? So this mess of this messaging, nurses are heroes, doctors or whatever. Bunch of BS, all of it. The suffering that we went through for a man like my father to be in a hospital for 2 weeks and to die alone. Guys, I remember I was sitting on my sofa and he FaceTimed me to tell me that he was going to sleep. And that was the last time I ever talked to him, because by the next morning they put him on a ventilator.
Oh my God.
And so then I stayed here, and I stayed for like a week longer. I mean, it's unheard of what you would do. This was because of the COVID protocol banana shenanigans. Yeah. I finally got on a plane and went there, and my dad was pretty much already dead. They let us show up at the hospital it was before they were going to disconnect him from everything. And that was it. And we never got to say goodbye. And this is, my father's a family man. He's what would it have been like if he could have had us around him? Could it have changed anything? Would it have made a difference? I don't know the answer to any of this, but I don't think it's fair that they kept us away. This universe has been through plagues, has been through leprosy in the Bible, and we were never, ever banned from being around our loved ones. What is wrong with the society that did that to us? And the media pushed it as hard as anybody else.
And one of the words specifically that you used, especially in episode 2, that you used about that whole thing with your father being in the hospital and you being in isolation. You specifically said isolation multiple times. And that really stood out to me because, I mean, even if you look now, I'm pretty sure in any article, they'll say lockdown during that time, not isolation, because isolation is a very specific word and it means a lot. What is the worst thing that could happen to a prisoner? Solitary isolation. The people cannot be alone, even if you're locked in a house with family. Yeah, that helps, but you can't be alone with the same people for that long of time either. We are social creatures. And when you are locked alone, you said you wanted to avoid making those bad decisions and you still made some of them. That's going to happen because your mind is out of whack, and everyone felt this. I mean, luckily I had a job at that time where I was able to still work and go out and see people a little bit because I was what was it?
Essential worker.
Essential. I was an essential worker.
Bullshit term.
Exactly. But I was able to do that. So it didn't hit me as hard, but I can only imagine how much it hit people who literally just couldn't go anywhere.
Oh, it was insane. Yeah, I said isolation because I live alone. I lived alone in Los Angeles at the time. Yeah. So there I was by myself. My father's in the hospital. My mother's by herself. It was some crazy thing. And I know, here's what I know that I always know, that anything that hits my family, we're a microcosm of the rest of the society of the United States of America. You know, there's enough of us. I have 6 brothers and a sister and my parents and the way we were raised from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that if it's happening to me, if it's happening to my family, it's happening to so many more people. That's what I learned along the way as a broadcaster, that I was just like everybody else. That what happened in my family was everybody else, right? So I could see some of the things, and my coworkers knew I was angry. I was really angry at them. I was angry at them because they weren't asking the right questions. They weren't challenging anybody. They were going along with it. They were telling people to wear masks, and
which is a joke.
That's not their responsibility.
Exactly.
They should never, you are never supposed to advocate for anyone as a journalist. How dare you tell people to wear masks? And yet it was an accepted thing. It was promotions upon promotions everywhere you turned.
Yeah. It wasn't, and I hear you say that, you regret making some of your decisions and you regret the bad decisions. I personally think that you should not feel that regret. Because like David said, you were put in a mind state. We were all in very different mind states, whether you had family next to you, you didn't. And, fear does a lot to people. It does. And what they did to you at your job was inhumane. And to everybody, to make you fear for your job as a valued member, an experienced member of that group was wrong. And obviously that type of pressure, I don't care how strong of a person you are, that type of pressure can break anybody. So, not to deflect, but if you are a microcosm of your father, just from a little bit of talking to you, he understood. You know what I mean? It was kind of that thing where I don't think him, your family, anybody else is holding it against each other because it was such a ridiculous time. It was unprecedented, not for the disease. We've been through pandemics before. The absolute incredibly insane response where we were letting a man in Dr. Fauci who absolutely screwed up the HIV response and demonized a group of people exactly like he did this time when it came to mask wearers versus non-mask wearers, people that liked the vaccine versus people that didn't like the vaccine. I'm not blaming this all on Dr. Fauci. He's one wheel of the cog, but he was a pretty big wheel. And
you got to blame your local politicians.
Yes,
yes.
King Gavin Newsom, who has absolute control here in California, is to blame. The mayor of Los Angeles is to blame. They're to blame. So you never take away people's liberties. That is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Period. They're what you don't take away liberty from people. If people want to go out and get themselves killed, that's on them. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what, Liz, the thing is, though, and I'm going to be blunt and say it, socialists and Marxists don't believe in that. And if you look at this current version of the left, a person like Gavin Newsom definitely leans a lot more on the socialist scale than he would on the freedom scale. And you could just see it in his actions. Communist. Absolutely. Marxist.
Communist.
Absolutely.
He's a monarchist, apparently.
Yes.
He wants absolute power.
Yeah.
And yet I had faith in the people of California for a moment when the recall happened. Now, let me take you back to why there was a recall. There was a recall because the reporters of Fox, who I worked with, did a very good job. And they got a photograph of him out at the French Laundry, the restaurant up in, right, that none of us can even afford. Right. They got a photograph of him out at the French Laundry. Now, I'm not going to say, okay, maybe I can't afford it or I've been out there with some people. I never want to act like I can't do things like that when I do, in fact, things like that. Okay, fine. But who most people can't afford. Okay.
We can't.
Right. In the middle of a pandemic, he's out with no mask on. Okay. And yet we weren't allowed to be out at all. Right. So people were outraged. And my most liberal friends, the ones in Hollywood who everyone talks about, they were outraged.
But Liz, you know what the issue is? A white supremacist ran against him. Didn't you know? The blackface of white supremacy ran against him. So you can't have a white supremacist there.
Outrageous what they did to him.
It was incredible. And the fact that, here's an issue when Carrie Lake is going through this, Larry Elder went through this. Anyone that has a public persona that has a lot of opinions out there before going into politics has a much tougher road. A lot of these politicians that are greenhorns that don't have many of their things out there, they could be molded and Larry Elder had a lot of opinions out there already. So they were able to mold a lot of the things that he said and take a lot of the things he said out of context, even though he's a very well thought, very intelligent man that would have done wonders for the state of California. They took him out of context and they were able to be racist against him because he wanted an R next to his name. And it was absolutely terrible what they did to him in the state of California.
Well, they convinced enough people that Gavin got back in, and I lost some hope in there. And it's funny to me when I see Gavin in D.C. and he's going to run for, King Gavin's going to run for president. Has Gavin been to Florida lately? Because ain't nobody there going to be voting for King Gavin. He's really delusional. And somebody's, clearly the Democratic Party's propping up that delusion with him. But I do travel this country. I have been in Texas recently. I was in Dallas, and I've been in Miami, and I've been in Pittsburgh. Speaking of which, the people right next door to my mother, the next door neighbors, have Fetterman signs up in their yard.
Oh boy.
So they want a corpse? Why are we voting a corpse for president, and now they want a corpse for freaking in the Senate?
Oh boy.
What is
that debate, if that debate wasn't enough for everyone to say, well,
I don't know what to say.
He was brave. He was courageous to go out there and fight for all the people with strokes that want to run for office.
You know what that is? Those are a bunch of people with bad lives, sitting in bad marriages or bad something, who are hanging on to it's going to get better, because it doesn't get better.
So here's the issue.
That's not going to get better.
David and I have personal experience with stroke victims. David was a little young, but our grandfather, I was alive to experience my grandfather going through 3 massive strokes. And I'll tell you my experience with that. He was a man that came into America. He's from Ecuador, came into America pretty early on in the 50s, because my father was born here. My uncle and aunt were all born here. Came into here in the 50s, spoke pretty damn good English when I first knew him. Had his first stroke. Then his English was broken and he spoke pretty good Spanish. Had his second stroke, could only speak Spanish. Had his final stroke before he passed away, could barely speak. Okay? So for people to say that John Fetterman's going to get better, that is another one of the lies that they're telling us. Because you know what? I feel bad for John Fetterman in a way. He's not a good person. He's a shitty communist socialist. So his theories are bad. But I don't wish ill upon anybody because they're political theories. But in a way, he's been pushed out there and being told that he's able to do this. And he has yes men, and shame on his freaking wife for not putting her foot down, because we all know the power of wives and women in a man's life. And it's immense. A good relationship, the man and women have good pull on each other and can stop each other when they're doing something stupid. John Fetterman is putting his life at risk for having to go through this type of stress. You're not healing from a stroke with the stress of a senatorial campaign going on where you're not able to heal. You're forced out in the public. You're speaking constantly. His brain cannot rest. So the man is broken.
What I notice is how the media handles it. So the day after the event, so a lot of what I notice is it's hard for me to watch the media. Yep. John and I do the Death of Journalism, right? So the Death of Journalism is our podcast. For a while, I have shut out the media. I didn't want to hear what they had to say, but now I have to hear what they have to say, and I forced myself to go and listen. So I was watching MSNBC the next day.
Alex Wilson's an idiot. My God.
I feel bad for you.
He's so terrible.
But I can't do a podcast called The Death of Journalism without watching it, right? Without reading the New York Times every day, without making sure I see what are the questions being asked, right? Right? Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're giving you but it's in the questions they ask where they make the beginning mistakes. But what they said was, and John Zeigler, my co-host on the podcast, right away wanted to know, where's the clip? Because they kept saying, don't listen to Twitter. Don't listen to Twitter. So here's MSNBC. Listen to Twitter when we tweet it, but don't listen to Twitter when you see something. What media are you? What are you? So what I saw in the Associated Press the next day was a whole article from doctors talking about Fetterman and his stroke and how he can get better and how slow it's going to take. Never was there a doctor who gave an opinion. Yeah, it's bad and it could be bad forever, for a long time, and he may not recover. What about those opinions from doctors? Yeah. It was more like the media feels as though they better prop this up and be encouraging about this guy. There is nothing wrong with telling the truth. With putting on the truth. Because you don't have to prop people up. You're not being mean. That was one of the things I noticed with my journalism students.
Yeah. Well, because Dr. Oz is an awful candidate. We can put it out there. He is a bad candidate. He's going to be.
I like Oz. He's a friend of mine.
But he's not a good political candidate. He's not a conservative by any stretch of the word.
At least not for Pennsylvania. No. I don't think you should have a place in Jersey and run for Pennsylvania. I'm not going to lie to you. That's going to hurt you.
You should never lie.
And we have
No, you shouldn't lie. No, you shouldn't lie. No, right. I'm not saying you should lie. I'm just saying, I don't know if you should run for any office in Pennsylvania when you have a place in Jersey.
What I see with Oz, now my mother's in Pittsburgh and I visit her quite frequently now. So I'm in Pennsylvania a lot. When I told you Fetterman's the sign up next door, what I see with Oz is the political ads and the political attacks, which I feel are racist against Oz.
Yeah.
They paint him as an outsider from Turkey, as though being this Turkish guy is some terrible thing. My God, he's Turkish. Like, this is like.
He has an R next to his name. It's not racist. It's fighting Nazism.
It is just like, what have you painted this guy out to be when not that many years ago, when he was on Oprah on a regular basis, he was one of the most beloved doctors in the country. And now because of Trump and because of whatever, they can put this evilness. Oh, it's evil. It's hideous to me.
He's a world-class surgeon. And that's the thing that people forget. And I noticed what they did to him. Me and David talked about this on our last episode. They did the same thing to Dr. Oz that they did to Dr. Ben Carson. They don't call him doctor at these things. They call him Mr. Oz. They bring down his status intentionally.
And why is the media doing that?
Because they don't want people to have respect for him.
They probably consider it equity or equality of some sort. But if you've earned the degree and you have an MD or a DO, you're a doctor. Well, and he's a doctor. So who's the media to make that type
They'll call Joe Biden, Dr. Joe Biden all the time.
Yes. And the thing I will say is you brought this up at the end of the first episode that John Zeigler brought up to you how he said some of these journalists are really more activists than they are journalists.
Yes.
And I think that's definitely playing part in a good amount of these things where it doesn't have to be a full publication where it's like a lot of activists. No, it's only a small group of people that need to believe in whatever they believe in. And then they're just so annoying and they like infect and they just destroy everything in that publication and make it just an awful place. Well, maybe not an awful place, but they make it even tougher to bring out the truth and not stump for certain things.
Look at Taylor Lorenz. She's insufferable and she makes things awful for her own coworkers. Like Taylor Lorenz sucks.
Yeah, and she makes things awful. Yeah. And even in the questioning, during the Trump presidency and then during COVID, John brought to light for me, if we go back to With the Benefit of Hindsight, our first podcast together, I was one of those sports anchors and journalists. I did news as well. I was a news anchor for 15 years. I did news in Los Angeles as well. I was one of those people that wanted Penn State to drop their entire football program. I thought for sure Joe Paterno was guilty. And I went on the air and said those things. I was on television in Los Angeles saying those things.
And you have a connection to Penn State,
I had to keep an open mind.
You have a connection to Penn State, right? Didn't your brother play
My brother was on the 1986 national championship football team. I was certain Joe Paterno must know everything. John, I had to keep an open mind, but he opened my eyes to where, yes, there was a rush to a panic, a rush to judgment. And I saw it. I was so outraged by that presentment by the grand jury. But then when I started to listen more closely and the details started to come out, and then through some other processes, I talk a lot about Columbine. I covered that back in the day. I was an anchor on the air in Phoenix. There was a book written 10 years later that showed all the mistakes the media makes. The media makes so many mistakes in the heat of the moment. It's the nature of what you're doing when you report live like that.
And that's okay.
It is okay. If you come back and you say it the correct way later. You can always correct yourself. So an open mind is all we ask, is an open mind. There's nothing wrong with the correction. Now, some media thinks there is something wrong with the correction, but there's nothing wrong. You're only as good as your word. Correct it when it's wrong. That's all. Okay. So he opened up my mind to make me and I think I was always open, but I was guilty. I was so guilty like the rest of the media. And it was through the Trump presidency when I started to see the way the reporters in the White House were yelling at the president of the United States. I was ashamed of those journalists. I thought, it doesn't matter whether you think he's right, he's wrong, whatever. That's not how you handle a press conference.
There's respect for the office as well.
It's just not correct. It's not correct journalism. That's not correct journalism. Correct journalism is well-researched, well thought out, and tempered as much as possible. I'm guilty, believe me, of doing it wrong. Okay. And yes, we're all going to be guilty of doing it wrong. Then when I saw the COVID reactions to things, I really not only lived it, was in the middle of it, saw what the press did. I was so upset with the way the mayor of Los Angeles could go on television and spend 45 minutes every day without even being questioned. He never took questions.
I had Cuomo over here every single day giving his Cuomo report and just sitting there, a little Fredo over there talking about, hey, in the beginning, go to Chinatown. It's fine. People forget AOC, Andrew Cuomo, Nancy Pelosi all said you are a racist bigot if you don't go to the Chinatown in both California and New York City at the beginning of COVID.
I do remember that.
And they both flat out said to people, if you don't go and patronize these places, then you're just a fear mongerer and against China and Chinese people, and go on out. As AOC and Nancy Pelosi are both parading in the middle of those freaking roads, no mask on anyone around there at the beginning when most people were getting infected. And you have Cuomo jumping on there, parroting the same damn thing, and him saying, no, this is just the flu. But the
United States media allowed it. They allowed it by putting them on, giving them time on the air, freedom, 45 minutes a day. It was the Andrew Cuomo show.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? It was the Gavin Newsom show.
Yep.
You know, it was ridiculous. We have never treated a politician like that. There used to be a law called, the fair FCC had the fair. And that was and Crossfire became from that, and it was amazing. Right, you had to give the Republicans as much time as you gave the Democrats after the State of the Union. If it was a Democratic president, you had to have a Republican on.
Yep.
Equal time. You had to give equal time. Yeah. But we never did that in the history of the United States. And here we are doing that. The United States media allowed that.
And I'm going to one-up you there. I'm going to one-up you there, though, because not only did they allow... this is mainly about Cuomo, because I remember this about him specifically. Not only did it allow him the time to say whatever he wanted, but then they would write specifically some articles about how so many women could see how sexy he is now.
Yeah.
Oh, man, he's so hot. And that was a thing. And he was like, that was incredible to witness.
Gavin Newsom is a decent looking dude. Gavin Newsom's a decent looking dude, so whatever. But Cuomo is not good looking in any way, shape, or form.
There was a whole thing about whether or not he had his nipples pierced.
Who? King Gavin or Cuomo?
Cuomo.
You guys, I can hardly react to any of those things because for me, people's lives were at stake. And it did come out that Cuomo and the people and the leaders in New York caused the problems in the nursing homes.
100%.
You can ask Janice Dean about what happened there and all the work, that great work that Janice did to uncover a lot of that. And she took her victory lap when Cuomo got fired. And damn it, she deserved it. Because when he got ousted, because Janice Dean went through a lot. She went through, in a similar way with the healthcare system, with her father and her parents being forced into those nursing homes, and the medical system, who we praised up and down, like you said, heroes. And I am so tired of hearing that nurses are heroes. Nurses have a difficult job. But you know what, though? My wife works in the lab at the hospital. She was forced to be in that freaking job every single day as well. And you know what she does? She tells the doctors and the nurses what's wrong with the people so they could treat them. So you want to talk about somebody who's a hero? My wife was in there just as much. Those janitors that were in there, those food workers that were in there, they're also heroes. And everyone's a hero because you know what we noticed? Everyone went home, right? No one worked. Our economy went to shit. We were all essential workers. There is no such thing as an essential worker.
Yes, but does your wife do fun dances on TikTok?
You know what? No, she doesn't. She has a little self-respect. But so we've been here, Liz, bashing the media for the better part of 40 plus minutes now. Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for media? Right now, CNN has a takeover. Discovery's coming in. Looks like they're trying to do something. Brian Stelter's out. Jim Acosta's out. They're looking like they're trying to clean house a little more, that they might do something. We have our alternative media sources. Glenn Beck started The Blaze 15 years ago now, told it was never going to work. And, there's a wide variety of opinions on The Blaze. The Daily Wire is another alternative. But the mainstreams are still the mainstreams. They might not get as big as they are, but they still have their names. Is there a chance for the mainstream press right now? Can they be saved? Can they come back from what they've become?
I think it would take an incredible infusion of money I think that there aren't part of the thing is part of what's gone on here is you have to feed the beast, right? So everybody's on 24/7 and everybody's trying to beat everybody else. You have reporters admitting that there was the reporter caught up in the Elon Musk. Some guy said they were fired, right? That there were layoffs, and reporters legitimately think they're reporting that there are layoffs off of Twitter. Off of Twitter. Unless you know, it's whatever happened to two sources. So what I'm getting at here is there are no checks and balances. Like in the newsroom, in a journalism, there's never one journalist. Like you just don't write a story and then it just gets published. Well, it does nowadays. But a good journalism has the journalist, maybe more than one reporter's in on that. Now you've got an editor, and then maybe you've got another editor. That there are so many different layers there that get it, but not nowadays. No, not nowadays. That doesn't happen. So because there is no staff anymore, right? So even on television, on live television, when you're seeing things happen around you, right? There were people that would see the live shot first or maybe prepare before it goes on, whatever. But now it's just boom right there. It doesn't even have to hit broadcast. It hits social media. And if you want to believe what you see on social media,
good luck.
You better double think about that, because trust me, they are not showing you the picture. A trained journalist knows you have to show. And I don't trust journalists anymore, because I don't trust that they're showing you the whole picture. There are good journalists out there who know how to show you the whole picture, but you can't show you can't show a clip. You cannot show a clip. If you're going to show a clip, you need to know perspective. But do I have hope? I think what's being taught in journalism schools, some of them, many of them that are considered the top journalism schools, are not teaching well what a story is. Students think a story is in the SEO. And, let me look it up on the search engine. I overheard my students telling each other this. This was Arizona State. And, you always get the best stories. How do you get them? And he said, well, I just put the right words in the search engine. And that just hurt my heart. And I had to have a lesson that day. And I said, you must understand that news is not found in a search engine. News is something that's never been spoken of. News is that. It's new. But if you go in the search engine or you look for the hashtag, and my students got praised, not by me, praised by the system that we worked in at the school at Arizona State for getting lots of likes, lots of let's look at first day would start every day by looking at the analytics.
Oh my goodness.
But a story that is a true story may not hit fire for a while. Yeah. It may take a minute. It may not hit right away. It may take a year before it gets picked up. So true journalism isn't in the search engine. And so that's why my fear is that, because I always say now, I think people want to be pretty, not journalists. So that's why they're on TV or in front of a camera on TikTok or wherever they are. They want to be pretty and they want to be liked.
Yep.
And you're not going to be liked. You're not going to be liked. Oprah Winfrey is a media mogul. She was liked 50% of the time, if 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to be liked. And I just don't think our system is set up for it. So I don't have a lot of hope. However, Alex, let me say this. That if you go back to the beginning of the United States of America, and you go back to the time of Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, that what there was back then were lots of different, this is where the term yellow journalism even came from, right? There were lots of different journals. There were lots of different rags. There were lots of different places people got news. All of them biased.
Yep.
There were many of them. So it's not outside the history of the United States to have biased media, okay? I think one of the bigger devils in the mix is social media, because people believe it when they should not. Nothing on social media is real. The check mark, because LeBron James says it, doesn't make it fact. It just says that's what LeBron James said. And sometimes he needs to be criticized for not paying attention to what the heck he's tweeting.
Yes.
So I wish people, this is an audio only podcast, and I wish we were doing video at this point, because to see the legitimate, it's not even funny, because part of me feels bad, because I could tell how passionate you are about this.
You might have to do video for this one.
I'm a professor.
I could tell that you, it hurts you that you've been doing this for so long, and it hurts you to see and to even say that you don't have hope right now. I could see that doesn't make you happy to say.
Yeah, I'm not.
I love journalism. I'm the First Amendment, freedom of the press. A free society, a free world needs a free press. And so we need to have the ability, not what King Gavin says, you can't spread misinformation. If we spread misinformation, fine, then put the right information in the next newspaper or the next.
We want misinformation out there so we can hear the crazies and the yahoos and what they have to say and disregard them.
But the freedom of the press is so important, because if we don't have it, then we have China. And we are China.
So
I'm not going to lie. Real quick. Because I kind of put that question in there. I really wanted to ask about that because I was hoping for a little more of a white pill. It definitely black pilled me a little bit. Completely, I do like that you at least put a little bit of hope in there. It is saddening to see how bad it actually
And I hope that Elon Musk will turn Twitter into something that isn't censored.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Can I hold out hope that that's what he'll do?
I don't know. He met with a bunch of wokists I just saw it tweeted. Met with a ton of wokists.
It's one meeting.
Content. It's one meeting. But the same people, I looked up their Twitters when Elon bought it, was all talking about a neo-Nazi buying it and everything. But that's kind of what I like about Elon, because he's like, oh, you want to talk shit about me? Let's have a meeting. Do it to my face. And I'm cool with that. I'm hopeful.
I agree with that. I'll agree with Elon. I'd like that too. If you want to say something about me ever, let's talk. Yeah. I'm happy to talk to you. I don't have a problem with that. But I would like to this control that social media, and I don't know if Elon Musk can clean up Twitter. I don't know if he can. Yeah. I don't know if anyone can. But my hope would be that it would be open to more, like, just don't censor things. You know.
So speaking of that, it just came out the other day. There was a lot of paperwork that the Department of Homeland Security has picked up the ball, where the censorship bureau that Biden tried to do early in his presidency, that got ripped apart by everyone equally, like, no, we don't want this. But then it came out that the DHS was then working with social media to do that anyway, to censor people. And all the times where Republicans were yelling about shadow banning, censorship, and this like that, Project Veritas breaking story after story, and then the media playing cover for it, like, that's not just happening. It's a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's those crazy MAGAs. Don't listen to them. Now there's actual proof that the DHS was working with Facebook, Twitter, other social media tech moguls and giants to censor what they believe to be wrong-think and misinformation. As a journalist, do you feel safe anymore putting out your opinion? And, you know, I think it's fantastic that the gods of media are allowing you and John to kind of shit on them. But does it
gods of media aren't involved in our podcast at all? Very John true. And I are beholden to no one. And Mike Agavino, who is our producer, is beholden to no one. That's a very important point you just made, Alex, that I should mention. That with the benefit of hindsight, our podcast about the Penn State and Joe Paterno scandal and Jerry Sandusky, that was done independently with Mike Agavino. And our podcast, The Death of Journalism, is done independently. That we don't work for big media. I was a mainstream media person for 35 years. No one's paying my check. I don't have to answer to anybody. So there are no media gods allowing us. Media gods either are afraid of us and are going to discredit us, and I'm waiting for them to call me crazy. Only I know so many of them. If they want to call me crazy, they're my friends. At least I think they are.
You'll find out who your friends are now and things like this. When you're going out on a limb and doing what you're doing, you're going to really find out who your friends are.
I already know they won't be there because they have to protect their jobs, right? So they have to protect their jobs. So they don't want to protect what we're doing. But I think that the American public needs, and also when they hear the truth, they know it. The American public knows the truth. I've always believed this as an anchor on television. I was a TV person for all those years, right? I always knew that I just had to be honest and real in who I was. That if it was messy, sometimes it was okay. That people can see through it when you're too perfect. People know. It's just a gut feeling. They love when someone tells them their gut's right. Your gut's right. Your gut's right.
Yep.
And that's all that they're going to hear from me. You got it right. You were right. You had a feeling. Now let me tell you why you had that feeling.
So, you know, and I really appreciate you saying that, because one of the people, a guy that a lot of people doesn't like, I know John goes on his show a lot, but Glenn Beck, the reason why, and you know, my dad was a Fox News guy growing up. I was born, you know, was a Rush baby and everything. So I definitely skew right my whole life. And by choice, I've continued to stay on that road. But, you know, initially when Glenn Beck was on Fox News, he was a crazy guy. He did it. And I was young and I was like, whatever. I went back to kind of listening to Glenn. And the thing that kind of kept me going with him and continuing to listen to him is every time he brings up something important, he flat out goes, do not listen to me. Do not listen to what I have to say and take it as gospel. Go find out and challenge me. Go look up. He tells you sometimes, look here, 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 and here. They'll be against me. See what they have to say, go against mine, and then figure it out for yourself. Brian Stelter once famously said it. One of the worst phrases is do your own research that the right loves to say. And it's such a telling thing when a major media person says, in this time and day and age of Google, instant information, if you look hard enough, you can find the type of stuff. Don't do your own research. Listen to us. We know more than you. And it's killed the trust, I think, a lot of people when he's done that. So I have to ask you one important question, though. Right now, I've mentioned a few times, you're kind of out on a limb doing things with John Zeigler. John Zeigler has been known as a person on the conservative right for a long time. You know, he knows a lot of people in media, but he doesn't have as many friends in media as he probably should because he challenges them. You have figured out a way so far to not be put on that blackballed list, being somebody in mainstream media, as we've seen people like Glenn Greenwald, Cheryl Atkinson, Molly Hemingway, even John Solomon. They were people in the mainstream press that weren't necessarily on the right. And because they sat there and opened their eyes and started saying, whoa, this stinks. And I'm a journalist. I'm going to research it and I'm going to put out my findings. And then when they put out their findings, all of a sudden it's, they're not towing the line, so now we have to blackball them. Do you feel like that's coming for you? And what do you think has kind of stopped that from happening so far to you?
Maybe the respect that people have for the work that I've done over all these years. I think there's partially that. I think it is coming. I think that that's okay. I think it's okay if it comes. I think that after this amount of time, that it's okay if it's not pretty anymore. It's okay if you don't like me. That I'm not here for the likes, you know. I'm here because it hurts. Mm-hmm. Because when you hurt people, you take life and liberty away from them. That matters, right? Mm-hmm. That matters way more than the likes, right? So if you believe telling people to wear a mask is going to wear a mask, wear your mask, it's going to be good for you. And you never stop when you know darn well in your own life that it's hurting you. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, I know a guy who's a professor at Syracuse University, and I told you, Newhouse is one of the top schools in the country for the type of thing that I do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he would double mask. He'd come to school double masked. Then I go to his house on the weekends. He'd have his mask off around the pool table, having fun and talking about the science doesn't show this works. Come on. I can't do that.
Science. It's the logic. I worked in construction when this whole went down. I was an insulator. I removed asbestos. And I knew if I had the beard that I have now, I have a little shitty beard, but it's there. I'm trying. But I have this little beard. If I had this, I would not get fit tested properly. The mask would not work. If you are walking around with an unfit tested mask with a virus that the particles are one of the smallest we've ever seen, and you're walking around with a cloth mask or a non-fit tested mask, it doesn't work at all. The particles get through. And if this is as contagious as they claimed it to be, just a little bit was more than enough to get you sick. Mm-hmm. So the mask thing was always nonsense. And the fact that medical professionals push this, they should all have their licenses checked and really be reviewed for pushing flat out lies that they know were lies.
At least the ones who went public with it. Yep. At least the ones who went public and did that, because most doctors that I know did not do that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So is it coming for me? It may be coming for me. They may come and say I'm crazy or I'm all kinds of things, but I don't know that. I think that it resonates. I think that I feel that people feel I'm real. It resonates with them. I can't pretend. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not. John can be loud and John can be sometimes irrational in some ways, but I don't know that I am. And I see it through that scope of 35 years of being from that side of it. And I love journalism. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of friends who do it. They disappoint me and they know they do. Mm-hmm. But you know what the really good ones do? To keep their minds open. Mm-hmm. And I still have those friends too. And I drive them batty. I do. Don't think I don't. You know, I'm just waiting for just waiting for the dean at Newhouse to somehow I embarrass him, right? And I never would want to embarrass him. He's a wonderful guy doing a wonderful job. And I'm so happy I had that opportunity to be there. And I'm so happy with everybody I've ever worked with that I had the opportunity to work with them and to be there. And I'm grateful because I learned so much from all of them, right? But I don't think that they're against being fact-checked in a real way. Not fact checkers. I hate using. I hate that term.
That term's not real. Not fact.
That term's been bastardized. But I don't think they mind having somebody to look at them and say, "Hey, ask this question. Think of it this way. Why are you doing it that way?" And if they are resistant to it, then they're in it for the wrong reason. I never turned anybody away when they came to me and said, "Liz, you didn't ask this. Liz, you didn't do that." Instead, I went, "Oh, you're right. We don't always think of everything. How could you?"
So, Liz, one of the things I think everyone's going to get out of this podcast is they don't have to see you to understand that you are authentic, that you say what you mean what you say, and you're fantastic. And, I wish we could go on, I think, for 6 hours and talk and really get into the weeds. But unfortunately, I don't want to take up too much of your time because, you're busy, you're important. And I really appreciate the time that you have even given us to come on the show. Yes. And I really do love it. Dave, do you have anything to ask or say to Liz before we close on out here?
No, I think we covered a lot of what we wanted to cover. I enjoyed everything that we talked about. And I think that honestly, you're awesome.
Thanks, guys.
You're really great to talk to.
Guys, keep up the good work. And I love when you talk about sports. I love when you talk about WWE. I love when you talk about the Jets. I mean, just keep talking about it. I think sports is fun. I don't want it to be the political animal that it's become. I think it's dying on the vine because it's too political, and it was one of our great pastimes. No one's watching the World Series anymore. And
that's
to me,
part of the reason.
Great joys.
That's part of the reason why we talk about it, because we don't want to do just a political podcast every week, because that's just tension for everyone involved. Yeah. It's fun to break away and just have something that just enjoy. So
keep up the good work. For me, as a journalism professor, I just I'm with you, and you're going to make mistakes, and don't worry about it. Just come back and say the right thing next time. And we do
correct. And David corrects me constantly when I'm wrong. He real time looks things up when he thinks, that might be fishy. He real time looks it up and he'll correct me on the show, and I'll say, oh, okay, that's right. Sorry about that, everybody.
So, you got to be grateful he's there, because you never want to get off the podcast and then not have the chance to correct yourself. It sucks. Come back to the next podcast and correct yourself. That feeling of getting it wrong, I've done it so many times. It's so sick in my stomach if I can't correct myself, So good for you guys. And thanks for having me.
So once again, she's Liz Habib. She's the co-host of the brand new podcast, The Death of Journalism, one that I recommend for everybody to go out and listen to, because I think it's one of the most important podcasts we have out there right now. They're doing an amazing job really dissecting, exposing the truth of what is going on in the media right now. And if anybody in the media wants to listen, you should. Because then maybe you guys can better yourselves and can create a better media and give us the fourth estate we freaking deserve. Not the French fourth estate that caused a revolution, that caused a bunch of people to be killed, which you're going down that way. I'm sorry. The media currently is going down the way of the French fourth estate, where their influence is more political than it is the voice of the people. So we really need that to be a thing. So again, go listen to Liz and John. They're amazing at what they do. Liz is obviously a wealth of knowledge. She's fantastic. 35 plus years experience in broadcast television, a professor. So it was a pleasure to have you on. We would love to have you on again in the future, Liz. Is there anything else you would like to promote outside of the new show?
Thanks for the plug of the podcast on Apple. Make sure you get it. The Death of Journalism, and it's at Liz Habib everywhere, at Liz Habib. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We will be back next week with another show. So long, everyone.